All right, we can do it now.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're ready.
Okay. Um, Hello, folks. My name is Tarpa, and I'd like to begin. It's customary to begin discussions of the Dhamma, the Buddhist teachings, with a bow. With a bow, we demonstrate respect for each other and to the Buddhist teachings. So,
Oh, you just can't see it. But yes, it's nice to be talking to you, Tarpa. Uh, Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
um, well, I've been studying and practicing Buddhism since I was 11. Um, let's see, there's um, not a lot to say. I one of the things I do is I try to save the lives of babies sometimes by educating people about babies in the womb and about alternatives to abortion. Let's see, and I guess that sums it up.
Yeah, and you're also a vegan, am I right?
I'm vegetarian. I'm not quite vegan.
Ah, for the audience that may not know the difference, could you tell it the
Okay.
difference too?
There are vegetarian is someone who does not eat the flesh of animals, whether birds, mammals, or fish, or reptiles, or insects, or whatever. Um, the there are four classical types of vegetarian. There are lacto-vegetarians who um, drink milk and eat dairy products, but don't eat eggs. There are ovo-vegetarians who don't drink milk or eat dairy products, but do eat eggs. There are lacto-ovo-vegetarians who eat dairy products and eggs, and there are vegans who do not eat any animal products at all.
All right, that's a good distinction to make. Um, Now, I remember we were talking in a chat one time about how Buddhism sort of has, you know, it's a very difficult time going into the actual dietary regiments of Buddhism. Like, where Buddhists disagree with each other exactly on the non-violence part, where how much it extends to when it comes to animals.
Well, okay, well, to be clear about that, the nonviolence towards animals is something that all Buddhists agree on. The only possible disagreement is whether eating meat is allowed, and the general answer is that it's basically a matter of conscience. That there are some schools which place more of an emphasis on not eating meat, like in particular for monks and nuns. There is a rule in um, some versions of Mahayana Buddhism. There is a rule for monks and nuns not to eat meat, but the general answer is that it is allowable for Buddhists to eat meat.
Yeah.
For
Um,
those in the
Wait.
go,
Say, I believe the main thing, the disagreement that comes over Buddhists with many Buddhists is over how the meat is obtained. Um, like many Buddhists would say, going out and killing an animal and then eating it would be unallowed.
And all Buddhists would agree on that part.
Yeah, but if say if you found an animal out in the forest and it was already dead, you didn't kill it, then and you decided to eat it, then some Buddhists would disagree on whether or not that would be allowable because you wouldn't be killing it in that case. You would just be finding it dead.
And right, and in that case, most Buddhists would agree that that was allowable, with the exception of for monks and nuns in the lineages which do not allow it.
Yeah. So you said you've been studying Buddhism since you were 11. So were you always a Buddhist, or were you a part of some other tradition beforehand and you just sort of got into Buddhism?
I was raised Catholic, and my introduction to Buddhism came through the TV show Kung Fu. Those for those of you who are familiar with that. So from there, I started reading more about Eastern philosophy in general, and actually, I guess I didn't take refuge vows till I was 14, but I eventually started studying all religions and picked Buddhism because I found that to be the greatest of all religions.
So, for those who aren't familiar enough with Buddhism, tell the dear audience about the origins of Buddhism, about the historical Siddhartha Gautama, and all that good stuff.
Okay. Let's see. Siddhartha was a prince in what is now Nepal. And he, this was about 2,600 years ago, and he lived a life of luxury. And when he eventually realized that the life of luxury did not lead to an end of suffering, that there was still birth, sickness, old age, and death, and that it did not lead to an end of suffering. So he left the palace against the wishes of his family, and he lived as a recluse, wandering recluse, for 7 years, and in particular, he followed the path of self-mortification, which was popular at the time, where holy men would punish the body in ways. And he came to the conclusion, he was very good at that, he came to the conclusion that did not lead him to the end of suffering either. At one point, he pressed his stomach and could feel his backbone because he was so emaciated, and realized that had not led to an end of suffering. So he followed the middle way. He began to eat a normal amount, but not live the life of luxury, and he eventually attained enlightenment. And so for the next 45 years, he taught, for the rest of his life, he taught others the way that he had discovered, the way to enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path. And many people under his tutelage became enlightened as he had.
So, was he historical individual himself, born a Hindu, and was dissatisfied with a rigid caste system and sought a new way of life when he was enlightened?
Yes, the caste system wasn't one of his major motivators, but yes, he did speak against it somewhat, and so the monks and nuns, yeah, and lay Buddhist practitioners, they could come from any caste without distinction. And when someone went forth as a monk, they lost their caste, that they were no longer, they were joined in the stream, and so they were no longer considered by the Buddhists. They were no longer considered a member of a caste.
And then Buddhism grew larger under Ashoka, who was to Buddhism what Constantine was to Christianity, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's
and then how did so a lot of people wonder, how did Buddha become deified if he was never seen as a deity until later?
He was not seen as a deity until later. This might be
in China and Japan in particular.
China and Japan. So this might be a good time to talk about the two branches of Buddhism. the two branches, the two major branches of Buddhism are the Theravada, the way of the elders, and the Mahayana, the greater vehicle. The Theravada is the only surviving old school. It's the only school that's faithful to the teachings of the Buddha as he laid them down. The Mahayana, some hundreds or so might be good to talk a little bit about how his teachings were preserved. During his lifetime, he had an attendant monk, Ananda, who was said to have a phonographic memory, and he memorized all of his sermons. And 3 months after the passed away, his final passing away, the Sangha gathered, the Sangha, the community of monks gathered, and Ananda recited the suttas, the sermons of the Buddha in their entirety. And then so they were passed on word for word recitation from a senior monk from senior monks to junior monks ever since. 100 years after the Buddha's nibbana, parinibbana, his final passing away, there was the community of monks got together again. It was the second council, and they confirmed the body of teachings of the Buddha, and they continued to be recited word for word, syllable for syllable, from senior monk to junior monk, for the next several hundred years. 500 years after the Buddha, there was, in Sri Lanka, they were written down for the first time. And so the Theravadan teachings, the Tipitaka, those are pretty accurate records of the Buddha's actual teachings. Now, many hundreds of years after the Buddha, there were some people who believed that they rediscovered lost teachings of the Buddha in non-material realms, and so these were written down, and actually they weren't written down until about 1400 years. They were recited orally, but they weren't written down in their entirety until about 1400 years after the Buddha, and that was the first writing down of them in China. Let's see. So there was so those two, to scholars, it's believed that those were not written by one person. So the Pali, such as the Theravadan teachings, those have the consistent and coming from one mind, whereas the Mahayana sutras appear to come from many different people over many different schools from many different centuries. And so so there's a tremendous amount of diversity among the Mahayana schools, and which has continued to develop. A good analogy might be that the Mahayanists are to Buddhism what Gnostic Christians are to Christianity, is that they have there's a lot of they have a lot of additional texts that the mainstream Christians don't accept as being authentic. So in some of the Mahayana schools, they've elevated the Buddha to being similar to a god, and so
this would go against what he himself taught, right?
I think so. I mean, he never said one.
He didn't really deny the existence of the gods. He just ignored them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Now, there was the Hindu gods were called devas, and devas did appear in the Buddhist teachings, but they were demoted. Whereas they were still, although they lived for a very long time, perhaps millions of years, they were not eternal and they had not escaped the cycle of birth and death. And so when they appeared in the suttas, they mostly they were there to give their approval to the Buddha's teachings. For the most part, there was one god in the very beginning, Brahma Sahampati, who, after the Buddha's enlightenment, convinced the Buddha to teach others. The Buddha was deciding whether or not to teach others, and this god convinced the Buddha to go out and teach others the way to enlightenment.
What is your view on God as a Buddhist?
Well, as a Buddhist, I don't have views on the subject as a Buddhist because that's not part of the Buddha's teachings. Personally, I think it's one of those questions that it seems to be a clear question only as long as you don't clearly define your terms. If you, personally, I think that the more clearly you define your terms, that the less clear the question becomes. Let me give you a comparison. I had a Christian friend ask me if Buddhists believe in God, and I asked her, well, what do you mean by God? And then she said, well, do they believe in the God of Abraham? And so to me that's changing the question in a sense, because what she's asking when she changes the question from do we believe in God to do Buddhists believe in the God of Abraham, she's in a sense asking for the Buddhist view on
Christianity.
Judaism, so
Right.
So which it doesn't have any opinions on.
That version of God, like the creator of the universe, prime mover.
Okay, right. So it's not a part of the Buddha's teachings. Now there was one case. Now the Tipitaka is pretty big collection. It's several times larger than the Bible. There was one time where someone asked the Buddha the question about, is there a creator God? And the Buddha said, well, if there is a creator God, then he must like the Buddha because the Buddha experiences such pleasant feelings. So whether you find that argument convincing or not is up to you, but that's what he is recorded to have said.
That's actually very interesting. So, generally speaking, what are because reincarnation tends to be a very big topic that I've seen that comes up in Hindu and Buddhist talks. What is the Buddhist view sort of on reincarnation and stuff like that?
Okay, well, this kind of leads into the three marks of existence. The three marks of existence are suffering, impermanence, and egolessness. And what this means is that all existence contains suffering. All existence is impermanent. All lives are impermanent, and in essence, there is no self. So that's what egolessness or anatta means, is that there is no self. So the Hindus said that there was an atta. In Sanskrit it's atma, that there's an eternal soul, and the Buddha said that there is no eternal unchanging soul, there is no atta, and so nevertheless, he did not deny rebirth, that the cycle of life and death does continue, that this life leads to another life, and it is only by attaining enlightenment, nibbana, that attains an end to the cycle of birth and death and of suffering. And that you're reborn according to the results of your actions. So if you harm others in this life, then you'll most likely be reborn in a lower form of life or even in the hells in the next life. And if you perform beneficial actions to yourself and others in this life, that you'll, especially to others, one might say, that you'll be reborn in a beneficial, in a higher life.
One question that others may
So
have. Go ahead.
I was going to say a common criticism that that sort of views from people is that it sort of encourages people to not help out the poor or because people
Yeah,
seem
no,
because people seem to think
that doesn't really fit at all, because the Buddha placed a lot of emphasis on generosity and kindness and compassion. So there is so yes, it may be true that their current state, that the state of all beings is the result of their previous actions. You can also improve your future well-being by being kind to others who are less fortunate than you in this life.
well, like I was gonna say is that generally the criticism is about people will say, well, then you shouldn't. I mean, it should encourage people not to really help out the suffering because people will say, oh, well, they were just horrible people in their past lives, so while I help them now, they're just getting what they deserve.
So I think we see that the Buddhist teachings avoid both extremes. It doesn't say that he clearly placed a large emphasis on compassion. So I think if someone said that, they would either not know the teachings of the Buddha about generosity and kindness or compassion, or they would be ignoring those teachings. So I think if you go to Buddhist countries, Buddhists are very generous. You go to Sri Lanka, for example, you would be astounded at how generous people are, at how kind people are, and how they wish to help other people. If you think about it, even without the view of, let's say we were just looking at it in this life. Okay, let's for as a thought experiment, just focus on this life. We find that in this life, poor people very often are poor as a result of their actions in this life. Not all the time, but very often. But nevertheless, that doesn't prevent people from being kind to them and to helping them help themselves, basically. So in the Buddhist teachings, there is, and in Buddhism, there's an enormous emphasis on generosity and being kind to others and being compassionate to others.
Yeah, that makes sense when you think about it. I mean, I would think that, because that goes into sort of karma. And I know that there's different schools of thought in Hinduism and in Buddhism about karma and what it entails.
Well, Buddhism doesn't. The Buddha's language was Pali. So the word that Theravadan Buddhists use is kamma, which is related, in the Sanskrit version of that is karma. So all schools of Buddhism agree in the law of karma, of cause and effect. That actions have consequences, and so that's a consistent thing between I think Hinduism and Buddhism, and to a lesser extent Sikhism.
Yeah. I believe a reason why many Buddhists, they go against the the suffering of animals is because there is the belief in reincarnation extends to say that the animal that you kill might just be a relative of yours that died beforehand.
Right, right. There is that view. That's one of the explanations of given as to why you should be kind to others, because in the endless cycles of birth and death, every being has been your mother or your father or your friend or your husband or your wife. So.
Oh, yeah, another thing I was gonna touch on is the image of Buddha, as these common Buddha statues depict him as he was, but others depict him as this fat, jolly monk.
Ah,
How,
ah,
how
a mistake I love to correct. That is not the Buddha. That is Hote. The fat one is not the Buddha. The fat one is
Right.
Hote. Right. Okay. So the Buddha was placed emphasis, at least for monks and nuns. He placed emphasis on moderation in eating, and so the accurate sculptures of the Buddha would be either of normal weight or perhaps a little on the thin side, not too thin.
Yeah.
And the a lot of people confuse the statue of Hote. Hote was a Chinese Buddhist monk from about I think 13th or 14th century, and he so that's who the fat guy is.
Or that's who people think the deity of Buddha is, in in a way.
Right. That I compare that to being like if you went to Asia and there were people there who thought that Santa Claus was Jesus, So
Well, sadly, Santa Claus is more recognizable than Jesus in Japan, for instance.
yeah.
So is Ronald McDonald, but
Yeah, for some reason. Um, yeah, so that is generally interesting when it comes to. I've always found the idea of reincarnation to be somewhat fascinating about how the different schools of thoughts that go on to it. How does how does your Buddhism come into play when it comes to your pro-life views?
Okay. Buddhism. Okay. The the Buddhist canon. Let me sort of clarify the word canon for any viewers who aren't familiar with the concept. The Bible is the Christian canon. The canon is sort of the most authoritative texts of religion, and the Buddhist canon is called the Tipitaka, or Three Baskets. In the in Buddhism, and this is going to be a statement that some Christians would disagree with, but I think that there's no doubt that it's true. Buddhism is the only major religion that I'm aware of in which, in the canon itself, abortion is condemned. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I even have a blog page which goes into detail on this. Okay, so if it's all right with you, I may talk about this for about 5 minutes.
Sure.
There is okay, so when after the Buddha's enlightenment, he taught his teachings to others. He sought out others and taught his teachings to them. And the ones who were able to and interested in following his teachings most completely became monks or nuns. They so as time went on, so the community of monks and nuns was called the Sangha. As time went on, and the Sangha grew larger, there were monks who did not intuitively understand how a monk should conduct himself. And so the Buddha started giving out rules for monks, which he called the Vinaya. The collection of rules is called the Vinaya. Altogether in his lifetime, he laid out about 1,000 rules for monks and nuns. And of those rules, there were 5 which he thought that could be beneficial to lay people, and he called these the 5 precepts. And it's the fundamental practice for practicing Buddhists, practicing lay people. Of those 5 precepts, the first and most important is not killing. So that applies even to animals. A practicing Buddhist does not even kill animals, does not kill people, does not kill animals. Now, of the 1,000 rules for monks and nuns, there were 4 which were so important that if a monk or a nun broke one after being ordained as a monk or a nun, then he or she could no longer be a monk or a nun. That he could no longer be a monk. Let's focus on the monks for a moment. He could no longer be a monk, and in this lifetime, he was no longer a monk, and he could never again be a monk. So other monks, monks in general, although it was preferred to remain a monk for life, it is allowable to give up the robes and return to lay life. But if one has broken one of the 4 parajika, the rules of defeat, while a monk, before giving up the robes, then one can never again in this lifetime be a monk. One of those 4 rules, as one might imagine, is the rule against murder, the killing of a human being. Now, from time to time, on many of his rules, a monk would do something, and people would have a question as to whether that action was a breaking of the rule. And so when he was presented with that question, he would have one of 3 answers depending on the action and the rule. He would say, yes, it's a breaking of the rule. Or he would say, no, it's not a breaking of the rule. Or he would say, yes, it's a breaking of the rule, but it's less serious. So when he was asked, so there came a time that a monk committed abortion. And so the Buddha was asked, did the monk break the parajika against murder? And the Buddha said, yes, he committed murder, and he can no longer again. It is parajika. So abortion is parajika. It is a type of murder, and that monk can never again be a monk or a nun in this lifetime. That monk can never again be a monk in this lifetime, and similarly for a nun. So it is. He did not. He said it is a breaking of the rule. He did not say it is a lesser breaking of the rule. He said it is a full breaking of the rule. So he clearly and precisely stated that abortion is murder. So that's the Buddhist position on abortion. So that's how Buddhism ties in with the pro-life view.
That's very interesting. I actually didn't know that about. I mean, it doesn't surprise me really because abortion in of itself, when you just watch the videos on it, it's clearly a very violent procedure, and it doesn't, with people that are very much say that they're all about nonviolence. It seems like a no-brainer that abortion would just be out the window for them. So, I mean, I definitely see where it would come from. I was wondering, since you went into monks and nuns, many people are very curious about what their roles are exactly. Is their position similar to, let's say, the Christian monks or nuns? And if not, if there are big differences between the two?
Okay. Let's see. In the differences between the two in terms of what exactly?
Like the differences between the two, like, I know with some like in the more Christian traditions, a monk is disallowed from having sex.
Oh yes. Okay. No, and in fact, so this might be a good time to say the four parajika, the four rules that breaking them is automatic expulsion from the order. So murder, as I've already said, is one. The very first parajika, which was the very beginning of the Vinaya, the first rule in the Vinaya. So before this, there was no Vinaya. The monks knew how to behave basically, and just by watching other monks and intuitively. So the very first rule that was broken that led to the beginning of the Vinaya was there was a monk and his he had left his wife, which was at the time was allowable. Later on, at the request of his father, the Buddha made a rule saying that you couldn't leave your wife to become a monk unless you had her permission, as well as your parents' permission. But before he had that rule, there was a monk who had left his wife, and his father asked him to conceive a child with his ex-wife. So he said, we will take care of the child, but we want you to conceive a child. And so the monk did this. And so the Buddha said that, well, he said that any monk who has sex and is no longer a monk and cannot be a monk in this lifetime. So that was the first one. Another one is murder. Another one is stealing, and the fourth is falsely acclaiming a spiritual attainment that you know that you don't have, and it's in particular it's the super mundane attainments. So if you're then it's not defeat, but if you say it basically as fraud, if you know that you have not made that attainment, but you say it anyway, then you are no longer a monk or a nun. So those are the four parajika. The next most serious category is called the Sangha Dasesa. And so these rules are not enough to expel one from the order, but they are serious enough that a monk is supposed to confess it in front of a gathering of 20 monks. So in that category, one of the rules is masturbation. So if a monk masturbates, he's supposed to confess it in front of 20 monks.
Why is that?
Well, because the Buddha's teachings are about the eradication of the passions. So this might be a good time to talk about the Four Noble Truths, which are really the foundation of the Buddha's teachings. There's the first noble truth is suffering, that all beings suffer, that we suffer in various ways. We suffer when we're born, we suffer when we're sick, we suffer when we're old, we suffer when we die, we suffer when we lose what we love, we suffer when we have to be with what we hate. We suffer in many ways throughout our entire lives. And that the cause of the suffering, so that leads us to the noble truth. The cause of suffering is craving. And the third noble truth is that one can eliminate craving and thereby suffering. The third noble truth is that if you eliminate craving, you eliminate suffering. And the fourth noble truth is that you can eliminate craving and thereby suffering by following the Noble Eightfold Path. So so his path is about the eradication of and also the other poison of aggression as well, aggression and ignorance. And so he so so the so that is why he made a rule for monks against masturbation. The monk's life is you're receiving. The monk lives on the generosity of the lay people. The lay people give him food, give him robes, give him medicines, and so he expresses his gratitude by following the Buddhist teachings as well as he can. And so the monk, one of the parts of eradicating craving is by not indulging in the passions.
Yeah, I think that sort of makes sense with it. I believe a key thing in Buddhism is the elimination of desires.
Yes, and in particular, craving, and sometimes there's a distinction made between desires and craving, because you could argue, well, there are good desires. For example, the desire to help others is a good desire, or the desire to eliminate suffering for oneself and others, that's a good desire. So craving in particular is the second noble truth. By the cause of suffering is craving, and the three types of craving are the craving for sensual desires, the craving for continued existence, and the craving for non-existence.
I mean, a typical thing would be, I found people would say, well, you have to give up the desire to give up all desires.
Right. So that wouldn't be a part of the Buddhist teachings. That's why the word craving is slightly better than the word.
So Buddhists are discouraged from looking forward to the afterlife.
Okay, this might be a good time to talk about sort of the two levels of teachings. The Buddha had two levels of teachings: one for householders, for lay people, and one for monks and nuns. The for monks and nuns, if you were entered the orders, the sangha, then you were expected to be serious about following his teachings. So the goal of the monk's life is to attain nibbana, attain enlightenment, attain the suffering, the end of the endless cycle of birth and death, the painful cycle of birth and death. For the householder, it's not necessary to have that intention. So the Buddha's teachings for householders were mostly about improving, lessening your suffering in this life, lessening the suffering for both yourself and others in this life and future lives, and improving your happiness in this life and in future lives. And the way to do this is by avoiding harmful actions, practicing beneficial actions, both of body, speech, and mind.
A common thing, so I was wondering, does that mean Buddhists are sort of obligated to see the Buddhists as a morally perfect human being? Or
no, well, Buddhism isn't exactly a belief-based religion the way, say, the Abrahamic religions are.
Is it closer to Confucianism or Taoism?
In some ways, Confucianism is. I read when I was in the 11 to 14-year-old range. I read some of Confucius's works, and Confucianism is mostly behavior based. It's about what one's duties are as a citizen, and so that's certainly part of the Buddhist teachings, but it's not the whole of his teachings, and in fact, it's not the essence of his teachings. Taoism is a little different. For Taoism, the Taoist canon is the Tao Te Ching, and it's really a pretty small book, and it's by and large it's pretty philosophical, and it doesn't really give clear instruction. So it's not terribly surprising that in China, people kind of follow both Taoism and Confucianism. Taoism is kind of a general philosophy, general subtle philosophy, and Confucianism is about the regulation of behaviors. So in some respects, yes, but it's not a perfect analogy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was more asking because, you know, a lot of times when there is some questions about some behaviors that people back in the Buddhist time engaged in and that Buddha engaged in now that some people would find somewhat morally questionable.
For example,
Like, for example, I believe back in the Buddhist time, slavery was sort of a common occurrence.
yeah, that was not part of the Buddhist teachings. I am not sure that I have never heard that before, but that would be more a question about Indian society than about Buddhism. There is no slavery in Buddhism. The Buddha didn't own slaves. There are actually maybe there is a mention. I think there are a couple mentions about that, and the Buddha basically, or at least about servants. It's not clear to me that they were about slaves, but basically he taught employers to be kind to their employees, and he encouraged employees to work hard and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it wasn't more of a condemnation or whatever. It was just more of a status quo sort of thing.
Well, I think it's a good example because it doesn't actually. Yeah, I mean, it does. It's not actually part of Buddhism, So
That's interesting. You got anything you want to ask, Carlos?
It's just how So what's the how does one know when one's final cycle is?
Okay. Well, okay. There's four stages. There's four fruitions in Buddhism. Or four levels. So the final level is called an arhat. That's essentially an enlightened person, a person who is completely free of passion, aggression, and ignorance, and who will never be reborn again. So if you're not completely free of passion and aggression and ignorance, then you know that you'll probably will be reborn again unless you attain enlightenment before your death. There's also some concrete ways. I mean, there are actions that an enlightened person doesn't engage in. An enlightened person doesn't kill others, either people or animals, because that requires ignorance, basically, ignorance and passion and aggression. An enlightened person doesn't steal. An enlightened person doesn't have a fully enlightened person doesn't have sexual desire. An enlightened person doesn't lie. So if a person engages in those kind of actions, then they would know that they are not yet enlightened. So I guess the first stage, the first of the four stages that one attains, is called Sotapanna, or stream winner, and those a stream winner has attained, practices the 5 precepts, and has attained unwavering confidence in the triple gem, in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, well, we know about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, and the Sangha, the community of those who have attained enlightenment. So that's the first stage. The second is there's a lessening of the defilements, a lessening of the poisons, and a Sotapanna stream winner has no more than 7 lifetimes before his enlightenment, and all of those lifetimes none of those lifetimes will be in the lower realms. They will always be as a human, or as a deva, as a godlike being, or an celestial being, I guess one might say. In the second stage is the once returner. There's a lessening of the defilements and the strength of the defilements, and the person will not be reborn more than one time. And again, that will be in one of the higher realms. And the third stage is called a non-returner, and a person will go to the highest of the heavens, and from there will attain the realm of neither perception nor non-perception, and from there it will attain Nibbana. And the fourth level, as I mentioned, is an arhat, one who is completely free from all the poisons and who will not be reborn again.
And one might ask if is this exclusive to Buddhists or just people in general?
No, this is goes to people in general. Now, according to Buddhism, you cannot attain the 4 fruitions without the Buddhist teachings, but you could still, but all beings are subject to the law of karma. So if you can still be reborn in the in any of the realms, the hells, or the realm of animals, or the as a human, or as a deva, a celestial being, according to the results of one's actions, according to whether one practices beneficial actions or actions that harm oneself and others.
So another typical one, I know we've, in our chats before on Twitter, we've discussed briefly the Dalai Lama. What is the Dalai Lama's connection to Hinduism, Buddhism, and the like?
Okay, well, he is a Buddhist. He is okay. So I mentioned the 2 branches of Buddhism. There's Theravada, the way of the elders, which practices the actual.
Is he sort of like the Pope of Buddhism?
No, he's the Pope of Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. So you have the Tibetan and Mahayana branches. In the Mahayana branch, there's 4 major sub branches. There's Chan or Zen. There's Nichiren. There's Pure Land, and there's Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. And so he is kind of like the Pope of Tibetan Buddhism, but he doesn't have quite the same level of authority over all Tibetan Buddhism. The various lineages have some level of independence. So he's kind of like a representative of Tibetan Buddhism rather than the Pope of Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, I know that because he sort of gets made out to be sort of a representative for all Buddhism, because he's generally the go-to.
Yeah, that's incorrect. He's not a representative of all Buddhism, but he's certainly the most famous living Buddhist. So it's not surprising that people would think that.
I believe they say in order to be the Dalai Lama, they sort of have to be born into that role.
Yes, that's correct. There's
this test when they're they're babies and they pick these certain
Yes,
toys.
that's correct. I practiced. This isn't actually just for the Dalai Lama. This is for any of the reincarnation teacher lineages in Tibetan Buddhism. I practiced Tibetan Buddhism for 4 or 5 years in the Kagyu school, and their reincarnation incarnated teachers called tulku. So the Dalai Lama is a tulku. He's believed to be a reincarnated teacher. He's the 14th. He's believed to be the 13th reincarnation of the first Dalai Lama. And they're recognized. First of all, they leave a letter. The Dalai Lama, a Dalai Lama leaves a hidden letter as to where he will be reborn and the circumstances of his rebirth. So after his death, they find the letter and then they go looking for him. And when they find a remarkable child that has miracles associated in some way around his birth, they go in. There are several high-ranking monks who go in and interview him, and they give him several tests. Like, for example, they will give him an item. They will give him 3 similar items, one of which is in actual possession of the previous Dalai Lama, and the other 2 or 3 are decoys, and he'll have to pick the right one. And they give him several tests like that, and if he picks all of the right ones, then that's an indication. If he otherwise seems to be the real deal, then that's an indication. There's kind of an interesting story in the Kagyu school. There are several sub-lineages, and the Karma Kagyu school, which is the one that I was practicing with, the head of the Karma Kagyu school is called the Karmapa, and the Karmapa lineage is even older than the Dalai Lama lineage. And there was a dispute over who the reincarnation was. So there was the traditional Tibetan politics is complicated, but the traditional selector picked one, but another high-ranking monk in the Karma Kagyus picked another one, and he got the Dalai Lama to confirm his selection, which is kind of odd because the Dalai Lama is actually a Gelugpa, and so he really shouldn't be involved with the recognition of the head of the Karma of the Kagyus. And so right now there are 2 contenders there for the Karmapa, for the 17th Karmapa, and each has their own sub schools which follow which have different opinions as to which the legitimate Karmapa is.
That's interesting.
And there's something else within Tibetan Buddhism, or is it something else with or Buddhism in general with meditation and astral projection?
Okay. Astral projection per se is not exactly a part of Buddhism, or at least not an important part. There's a long list of the minor powers that the Buddha gave. So he gave that if a monk had achieved a certain level of attainment, he could then attain any or all of the minor powers if he decided to put the effort and attention into it. And one of those powers was the ability to fly around. And so I believe, it's certainly possible that doesn't mean, he didn't go into a lot of detail. So that may not mean flying around with the body. That may mean astral projection. On that subject, it's kind of interesting because in that same list of powers, of the lesser powers, same list of, I don't know if it's 32 or 64, it might just be 32. 500 years before Jesus, one of the lesser powers is walking on water, and so this is one of the lesser powers that he was teaching to his senior students. But all in all, these types of things, they aren't really considered that important in the Buddhist teaching.
Well, we came up on the hour mark.
Okay.
So, to the people that have been listening, that are going to be listening, where can they find you at?
Well, my if they want to, my name's Tharpa Roberts. Probably one good way of finding me would be on the Buddhist Protect Life Facebook page.
All right.
And your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is now I forget what it is. Let's see. I think it's Sumpa Jimpa.
I'll put in the link.
Yeah. All right. So, any projects that you have that you're going to be working on?
Not exactly. I continue to, in my feeble way, practice the Buddhist teachings, practice meditation, the 5 precepts. Let's see. I do a lot of pro-life work, and I'm always interested in meeting people who are interested in the same kind of work. I am doing something which is probably not interesting to that many of you, but I am reconstructing some of the deleted passages in the translation of one of the books from the Tipitaka. So that's about it. So it's also customary to close with a bow. So anyone watching, may you be well, happy, and peaceful.
You as well.